Show me the money, said the best shortstops this offseason. But will we show them respect with our Dynasty shortstop rankings? Let's find out. It's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Tim Beckham that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out we're delivering tips that help you live a straight up OG lifestyle. Kyle Childs joined, as always, by Robbie Baseball, moving TVs in the murder room.
Yeah,
stopping him.
I just got this great idea that I've got my laptop in the middle.
Great.
I've got my yeah, air quotes, great. To the right of me, I have the second monitor that I use to put my or our conversation or whatever. What is this called? Our
stream.
Oh man, words is tough. Anyway, I've got it there, and then I was like, I wonder if I could set this other one up because I just saw this thing that splices things with technology. See, it's got 3 things to do technology with, and I'm like, maybe I could put the other one there and I would be like, organized. It's been sitting behind me for months though. And then anyway, I'm good, Ty. Thanks for asking. You didn't, but how are you?
I'm good. Yeah. I've been fighting, the virus that everyone else has had, something called the cold. And Ooh. That's been a battle in itself. So, 2 young children, I feel like I'm sick every other day at this point. So, it is what it is. But other than that, good. Played in a bonspiel on the weekend, which was nice.
Ooh, curling.
It did not help. It did not help the loss of voice.
Yeah.
I will say that.
Well, we were trying to figure out when we could record because we delayed so that you had a voice, which you were kind enough to do with me in the fall when I didn't have one for a long time. And I was like, well, Sunday night I played hockey. And you're like, well, Monday night I'm curling. How Canadian are we? And we're trying to do a fantasy baseball podcast because it's too cold to play baseball, but we can do the other sports, the winter sports.
It's barely too cold for those of you global warming fanatics out there.
It is currently snowing out my window.
Real quick for everybody that just got fired up about my global warming comment. The UN actually released a report this week that said the hole in the ozone should be repaired within the next decade. Fun fact for all those people that think we have to stop using all of the things that we use that destroy our planet. There's at least
so we
one
can keep tuning diesel engines. Is that what you're saying? We can keep tuning the diesels.
Yeah. We actually had a small chuckle. One of our businesses is a printing, and we do wraps for vehicles and stuff. And one of them was like an eco-friendly organization. It's like nothing says eco-friendly like wrapping your vehicles in plastic. So it's just like hilarious. Just the irony of it is just funny. But yeah, kind of a funny scenario.
We could go down a deep rabbit hole, but we won't. However, new legislation just came in Ontario, I'm assuming Canada-wide, about the use of single-use plastic. So, I'm a chef at university. We are in catering. We have a lot of single-use items. And over the course of the next 12 months, a lot of things are going to change for us. So, interesting times ahead. Goodbye straws. Yeah. And here we are. So that's it for the political segment of the show.
Yeah, just watch out for that turtle population. It's coming for you. But yeah, I think that's a great spot to change topics and start drinking. A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
Oh, what? You're doing that?
That delayed reaction. Yeah, we got a beer today, and
Bear hug. Ugh, it's an IPA. Gross.
yeah, that's pretty much all I drink beer wise from the Market Brewing Company here. I don't actually know where they're
Oh,
from. New Market. That's fun. Very creative.
oh, that makes sense.
Uh,
Market, new market.
for
Yeah.
those of you that don't know where New Market is, that's basically just like a burb of Toronto. So north,
Yeah.
not quite as far north as Rob territory, but um, it is just north of Toronto. So, Robbie, do we want to dive right into hot news today? Because I know there's a pile up.
Yeah.
And there's only like 2 transactions that involve Lewin Diaz this week. Uh, but
The
I think
numbers are going down on Lewin.
this could be his week where he finally gets to look at like, hey, should I get a condo? No, probably just live on the couch until you know for sure.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's had a rough couple
His
of
fifth
weeks.
his fifth DFA. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the big thing here. His fifth DFA from Baltimore for the second time. But as Ty and I were talking about before, Ryan O'Hearn, they picked him up, then they DFA'd him. He's now outrighted off the roster. If he chooses to stay, he'll retain his like 1.18 or 1.4, whatever his contract is, and he'll go to AAA. Baltimore's hoping to also get Lewin Diaz off the 40-man so that they can stash him in AAA. And then they'll have depth, allegedly, with those 2 dudes. So that's the first piece. We also have former Dinger's top pitching prospect Brent Honeywell Jr. signed with San Diego, who's signing a lot of guys. And the interesting thing is it's an MLB deal. Now, in a few other off seasons, we've had MLB deals that led me to believe that these guys were going to get like playing time for sure, and it did not lead to it with relief pitchers. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the guy that went from the Rays to the Mets. I think last year, maybe it was 2 years ago. It doesn't matter because he didn't end up getting time. So
Well,
just because Honeywell's there doesn't mean he's for sure on the opening day roster.
the nice part is they're going to be able to have a nice promotional arts and crafts night, paper mache elbows. Ron Honeywell is going to be all over that. So
I wonder
the
if
next round
he
was
and
kind of
Snell know each other. They were once upon a
that-
time in the Rays organization together. So
that's an interesting thought. That's very, very possible. Connor Siebold DFA'd by the Red Sox. That's one that we could see pass through as an interesting one. I can't remember was that because of the Hernandez trade? Was
that was
what
the
triggered that
official
one?
Justin Turner signing.
Okay.
Spraying that one up. And Siebold was like somebody who maybe lightning in a bottle, maybe not. Trevor Bauer's officially a free agent. We thought this was going to happen. It now is. So the Dodgers are on the hook for all that money, 22 mil for this year, but they don't have to worry about him. So there we go. I don't know if he'll sign. Talk about it some other day.
And from a guy that didn't actually break any Major League Baseball rules, regardless of what he did outside of it, to a guy that did break rules but is now unbanned and allowed to be a part of Major League Baseball again. John Coppola was the one that was notorious for basically selling the Braves' assets to their future prospects in many, many different unique ways. Got busted, lost 22 prospects. He back. So I'm sure he'll find a spot somewhere, or this move kind of doesn't make a ton of sense.
He'll be an international scout in no time.
Right? Yeah, no, he's probably that's a good point actually.
That was his big thing was he would find someone who was like the agent for a whole bunch of say Venezuelans, and he would spread the money amongst the guys that this agent was managing. And with the deal that, like a guy like Robert Poston was the big one, I think, that got him caught. And that was legitimately bad for everyone in baseball. And that should have been the big thing to get the universal draft. Never going to happen. So for another night, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm off the
next on the
soapbox.
list, a little bit, sadder news. Liam Hendricks has been diagnosed with, I feel like
non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Yeah, that one. Which is no good. Hopefully that he has a quick recovery and is able to skate through that unharmed. But obviously everyone's thinking about him there. Big bump for Kendall Graveman stats in terms of fantasy baseball. And not to forget about your boy Crochet, who's could find himself into a spot there. Right.
I can't wait for the RP episode with some of the things that are occurring with the teams loading up like Philly and the other ones with unfortunate things like Hendricks with the White Sox.
Well, and this is really interesting. Like the next one here, Gregory Soto going to Philly in and what's a very reasonable trade. It's a baseball
Absolutely.
trade. Soto and Clemens going to Philly, Matt Vierling, Nick Maton, and Donnie Sands coming back. I mean, it's really Donnie Sands is almost useless in this trade. But
Well,
the other
hold
two
on.
definitely. I said
You talk
almost.
about the other guys. Yeah, you talk about the other. I think that
Um,
Donnie Sands got hurt simply because he was with Philly. But I got a note on him. I got to pull it up. So do your
I
thing with
mean,
the
but
other
look at
boys.
the mugshot. Like if you go to Baseball Reference or Savant or wherever, and you see the mugshot, like nothing screams like career backup catcher like that mugshot. Like the data says he could provide minor value somewhere. And listen,
Yeah,
like you look at what
he
Eric
looks
Haase
like
did. Like who knows?
he looks like he's 42 in his picture, and the guy's
Yeah,
26.
he
But
screams
that's
backup catcher. Like just it's like you could might as well tattoo it on your forehead.
well, the only thing he does that's uncatcher like is he bats 300, and he doesn't do it by hitting a ton of bombs. He's a contact hitter, which is very odd for a catcher. Omar Narvaez is the only other one that comes to mind very quickly like that. But his OBP,
Well,
yeah, you
Alejandro
know
Kirk
me,
definitely has
411
that.
last year. I don't know who that is. I'm a Mariners fan. Anyway, it
You're right.
wasn't
You
it was
don't know about
abbreviated.
batting average for catchers.
Well, I do know about going to the actual playoffs, not 2 games. Anyway, um, not 2 games and calling it playoffs.
Well,
211 at bats is all he had last year between A and double A and triple A. I just got to get it out. So it's out there. 308 average, 411 OBP, and he was basically 1-for-1 walks to strikeouts. That was an improvement over his entire career. All of that, all those stats. But he was previously in 2021 with the Yankees. He was also a power hitter at that point, had 18 bombs between double A and triple A and 341 at bats. So he's an interesting case, but absolutely not a
yep.
lock for anything. Just an interesting case.
And I mean, worst case, he falls back on the name and he's a secondary character in the next Ocean's 11 movie. But Gregory Soto is definitely a value. The one thing I thought was really interesting in this trade is how many Philly fans I saw upset about this trade. And I think, Soto has a really minor amount of control issue, but you don't need Gregory Soto to be your closer like Detroit did, right? Like he's going to come in and just be electric in the 6th inning. Like I don't know that people outside of Detroit truly know how good his stuff is. And really, a second pitching coach could help him kind of hone some of that control issues. I love this trade. Giving up Vierling, and I mentioned this in the beginning of the season last year. I'll be like, how little I thought Vierling was going to contribute, and he nailed it in terms of that. So, like Nick Mytown has a little bit of upside, but he's depth. Really what he is. So I really think this is a depth move for Detroit. I think they gave up a little bit too much for what they got back, in my opinion. I just don't see the high end value that Soto has from a reliever perspective in any of the rest of that trade. And Indy had to give up Cody Clemens on top of that. I'm just not sure about this one.
My quick
I think
view on
Detroit
it is
lost this one.
Well, my quick view on it is that Vierling can play. He's a legitimate player. It's a matter of what kind of performance are you going to get. And for Detroit, you're stacking some shiftable option filled depth, and that's Vierling, Maton, and Sands. All 3 of them. Sands got the least amount of MLB time. Maton can just be a consistent utility guy for you, and he did pretty well with the Phillies last year. And it's just, what do they expect? Because like we know what he could be.
Vierling gets Green out of center. I think that's probably the most important part of this trade for Detroit, in my opinion.
Well, we'll have to see, because Detroit was also weird with how they gave outfield at bats last year. But the one good thing is that it blows it all up again in the bullpen for another team. So it'll be great to see what happens there. Speaking of blowing S up, Washington signed Corey Dickerson to a 1-year deal, which totally screws guys like Alex Call, Victor Robles, Lane Thomas, who and I guess there's more. Is it Stone Garrett? Yeah, Stone Garrett's the other guy. Now it throws it out the window as to where the at-bats are going to go with some of these guys, because Dickerson's going to take them, and he's not going to be great, but he could be okay. And like, come on. Like
what's really
they've just been
interesting
getting
here,
guys.
Well, I think this could be an interesting platoon bat for Joey at first base. Like, because I mean, at the end of the day, like Corey Dickerson might have the worst outfield arm in the last 30 years of professional baseball. Like it looks like the back quarterback from Longest Yard, whatever that guy's name was. It's like Sandler gets hurt and he's like, it's my time now. And I shouldn't eat that popcorn,
Oh,
right?
that guy.
So that's
Yes.
that's Corey Dickerson fielding a ball and trying to throw it. It's not pretty. And so that's the first thing that came to mind when I saw this. Is like, finally, someone's going to take him out of left field and put him at first base. So I think that could be plausible here because, Washington, as much as they had success at first base last year, like there's for sure no guarantee that that's repeatable. And we talked about that during the first base episode. So just something really interesting. Speaking of stacking depth, Wade Miley in Milwaukee with the absolute glutton of starting pitching that the Brewers have. This is a really interesting pickup. A guy that probably tags as a SP5 swingman right now, and I don't really understand it. Like unless they're going to move Burns, which I mean you really got to get an asset back to move Burns. So I just don't know who's out there right now looking to acquire Burns and give up a piece that it would take to get him back. I just don't know who that would be right now. Maybe the Mets, like come out of nowhere.
Wow, and if it's the right time to do that. Yeah, so he's.
The Mets have the depth. Miley, they've got the Mets have the prospects to do it. That's all. That's where I think the relevance.
Yeah, they certainly do. It's just, do they have the need at this moment in time? And I mean, if Burns played shortstop, I guess they would want him. But anyway, the other thing with this is that don't forget, everybody, in 2019, Wade Miley ruined all my fantasy playoffs because I had him all over the place and he sucked in our home league. I blame him for me losing in the finals because he was absolutely atrocious in September. Hashtag never forget. So anyway, Austin wins, DFA by San Francisco. That's a catcher, Ty. Figured you would know who he was. So he's one of the guys who you pick up.
I talked about him last year being relevant. He told me I was an idiot, and then he got significant at bats last year. So thank you for bringing that back up.
Whoa, okay, boy, somebody's sensitive.
Deep on that one last year.
Well, what I was going to say is he's a guy who was good for about 8 days last year, and then just became roster fodder with the Giants. But I don't know if he had a 3 home run game. I think it was Kurt Caselli that did. Anyway, San Francisco was a mess with the catchers last year, so he was there. Now he's gone. We'll see where he lands. A couple pieces of Blue Jay news: Zach Thompson, former Miami Marlin, then traded to Pittsburgh in Drew Stallings' deal last year. Traded from Pittsburgh to Toronto. He is going to be SP5 / first guy out of the bullpen. Pittsburgh wouldn't let him settle into the starters role last year. And he does some of those non-fantasy things that general managers like, ground balls, things like that. So he'll serve a purpose in Toronto. I just don't know if he's going to be like another Mitch White hanging out there. We will certainly need to see what happens in spring training and if there's injuries or if Kikuchi learns how to throw a strike.
Well, and they gave up nothing, right? They gave up Chavez Young, who's never going to break through the depth in Toronto's system. So, a lottery ticket for Pittsburgh, a lottery ticket for Toronto, everybody wins, right?
Absolutely.
Toronto also signed a bunch of other guys, including former Jay, Drew Hutchison. Trevor Lawrence is an older guy not Trevor Lawrence, Casey Lawrence. You're thinking Trevor Lawrence was football. Casey Lawrence has been kicking around in the Jay system for a few years. Is an older prospect, got a little bit of time last year. He was very much
amazing at AAA. Like he was so good at AAA, and then just didn't. I mean, we see it happen all the time. Didn't come together when he got promoted.
Yep, and I mean, he really only had a short window in a tough stretch of games for Toronto where they were beat up in the bullpen, so he got hung out to dry a little bit. Kevin Garlick DFA'd by Minnesota. While
Kyle Garlick, Kevin, and his name is Kyle, and I have him in multiple dynasty leagues, and just the way you're talking about him, I have to interrupt. You're being rude, okay? He has pockets of success, then he gets hurt, and then you hold on to him waiting for him to come back, and he doesn't come back. So now he's going to go to a new team, and maybe he's going to take off, or maybe he'll never have another MLB at bat.
It's kind of like the food thing, though, right? Like you can only eat so much garlic because you get bad breath. Maybe he's just that part of like baseball. He can only be good for so long before he just stinks it up. I mean, that's just the reality.
You can preserve garlic, okay?
Preserve, yes, but I'm talking about the ingestion. Which is
what you were doing? You were roasting garlic. That's what you were just doing right there. Okay, that's enough of that. Guy that we talked about in the second base episode that I had higher hopes for. in the future now seems like I'm silly. Sleeper second base guy Charles LeBlanc is now off the 40-man roster with Miami. Stayed with the organization, which is also kind of a hit for him because that means nobody else wanted to clear a spot for him. So he's going to go back into the AAA and I guess wait for an opportunity. He can back up with injury. Anybody gets hurt, he'll be back up. But that one kind of sucks. AJ Pollock, Ty, we got a little Seattle news here. AJ Pollock was signed by my boy Jerry Dipoto. 1 year, whatever it was, $6-7 million bucks. Doesn't matter. The money wasn't important. Just another depth piece here, which I appreciate the fact that Seattle's not just clearing the deck to let Jared Kelenic get 500 at bats. Because if it does not start well for him, he should not be playing on a team that's looking to advance beyond the ALDS this year. That's right, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this is a weird one. Like, I don't understand why you trade Kyle Lewis and then bring in AJ Pollock. Like, to me, it's kind of one or the other. Like, is AJ Pollock?
I think he's more the Haniger replacement. That's what I think. He's more the Haniger veteran replacement than I think Kyle Lewis is more like we're just not going to play him. That's what I think.
I get it. I just don't understand. Like, I would rather take the cheaper version, the younger version, the higher upside version. Like, AJ Pollock's not a bad player, but his best days are behind him. It's just a weird one for me.
They got
Johnny
Cooper
Cueto
Hummel in that deal.
Yeah, I still don't understand that one. Anyway, Johnny Cueto to Miami is a even weirder one. It has to be a precursor to a trade. Like, it has to be.
Yeah,
like it doesn't.
They've got to be desperate.
Well, like, I don't think you ink. I don't think you put ink to paper if you don't have a deal.
Yeah, I just don't understand why there were
close.
reports, right, that like 4 starters with the Marlins are on the trade market, right? Like their names are getting bantied about. So they signed Cueto. So it's like, okay, so I guess they must have had a deal that just fell through at some point, whether it was physical or it never got to that point. And they're like,
just waiting
we'll
for
be able to figure it out.
2 players, right? Like they might be doing some deep analysis of like 2 guys in the system versus, whatever. Like they've agreed to the core of the trade and like, let's see what these 2 guys do, blah, blah, blah. Or some guy that they agreed upon failed a physical and now they had to go back to the board to get another guy to fill that void, right? Like 100 different things could have happened. Somehow Brett Phillips is going to continue to play baseball at major league level. He's signed in that weird LA outfield. For me, this makes 0 sense. You have Mickey Moniak, right? And I get it. If you don't want him to play, if he's not ready, you want to put him in AAA or you want to use him you don't want to use him as depth. But like Brett Phillips is going to provide 0 to this team, like 0 outside of tell jokes. Yeah, like I don't get it. Like he's going to maybe tell jokes during spring training. He's going to get on TV, and then he's going to be useless. Like he was useless in Tampa Bay last year. He's useless here. This one makes no sense to me with the depth that they have in the outfield. This is just a bad signing.
Well, so right now in Major League Baseball, there are 3 two-way players. Okay. The Angels last year had 2 of them. They had Michael Lorenzen, who they didn't let hit bombs, and he pitched, but he didn't get to pitch much because he got hurt. And they had Ohtani. They still have Ohtani, and they picked up the other two-way player. That's Brett Phillips, baby, who can strike guys out with 46-mile-per-hour pitches, but also throw 91, I think it was. I'm confused by this too. It's just the kind of thing that you do to fill a roster when you don't have depth to fill the roster. But the Angels have prospects that they should be trying to bring in as their depth. A guy that would have been interesting for them to sign, because he's a free agent now, Ty, is PJ Higgins, former Cub. I don't know where he's going to end up. I hope it's in MLB. I hope he doesn't KBO or NPB it, because Higgins is an interesting target, first base, catcher. Anyway, the Hosmer signing with the Cubs really changed the landscape for them, and Higgins is out. Alfonso Rivas is out. So we'll see.
Only thing I'm going to, before we go too far past, the only thing I'll say for Brett Phillips, the only thing that I'll give him a checkbox on is that he pounds ground balls to the right side. Almost no ground balls to the left side last season. So is there a chance for a little bit of an improvement based on shifts changing? Maybe. That's all I will add to that. But yeah, I still hate it. Next on the list, Luke Jackson in San Francisco. I love this signing. Classic San Francisco recovery job. They've made it very, very clear over the last couple of years they're very good at this. So that's a good one. Luke Jackson was playing setup man in a World Series, and here he is recovering. So this is a guy that for me, Robbie, like I like to you generally pick up a reliever in season. I love this as a early to mid-season acquisition to bolster a bullpen in almost any format. I'm not expecting electric stuff on day one because he's coming off Tommy John, but like halfway through the year, I like a reliever to figure his stuff out. So like that one. Colorado signing more crappy depth to go with Austin Gomber, Ty Black, and Josh Rogers. That's just nothing news. Like these guys are going to be irrelevant. If you're picking these guys up, you're probably in trouble. Former Colorado average baseball player Trevor Story had elbow injury. Is he out for that extended period of time? I didn't get that. I got that he had surgery, but it didn't sound like he had extended window he was going to miss.
So what I have found out from the surgery, and I did not put in the notes, and I cannot remember it off the top of my head. It's got about a 6-month recovery time, but it's different person to person. So he could be on the 4 or 5 month side of that, or he could be on the 7-8 month side of that. So safe to say we won't see him until the summer. And that's just recovered. That doesn't mean back in Major League Baseball. So the potential for the Red Sox to need to sign someone to play shortstop is very high now because they've lost their middle infield over this offseason with Bogarts and Story. Now, even if Story is only out for 4 months and he's back in, May, June, that doesn't mean you're getting the Trevor Story all-star version, because when Trevor Story previously hurt his shoulder, he had a huge dip the next season, and a lot of people recoiled back from him. But he's a 5 category type guy. So this could be a complete write-off season if you are in win now mode, and somebody else wants to do the buy low on Story and you want whoever that guy is. Now's a great time to make that move. So Jose Iglesias signs with Boston. That's a guy I would want all day long. But he's got to sign.
A guy that is not very good, like say Santiago Espinal.
I don't know if that division trade's going to happen, but that'd be interesting. A weird trade that has a lot of kind of interesting things to it. Doesn't seem like one off the top that you'd care about. Miguel Rojas to the Dodgers, veteran infielder, for Miguel Amaya, who's now with Miami and has options so he can be sent down. It opens up at bats in Miami because Rojas had over 500 last year. It puts the Dodgers into the luxury tax. So that could mean that they want to make moves from there to get under it, or they just don't care about being in it again. But it's an interesting deal that might have more significance as the season rolls on. Rojas, I think, had surgery either at the end of the season or this off season. I think it was wrist surgery. So he should be back for spring training normal. I'm sure that's part of what the Dodgers are counting on. And Ty, you said you liked this move, but I guess we're going to talk about that in the rankings. So maybe we don't get into it now.
Yeah, I like it for Rojas. We'll get to it later. But yeah, the one of the more interesting ones, and I did a little digging on this one because it's been a long time. Shintaro Fujinami signed with Oakland, 1-year deal, under $4 million. This is a guy that came out in the same high school class as Ohtani.
Yeah, he
did. And has absolute gas. The big red flag for me, looks like a splitter. I don't know. I couldn't get a good view of the grip. Could be a changeup, but looked splitterish. High velo, splitter. But what was the big red flag was an absolute tackle box of a curve slider that just not good enough to be pro ball. So what I will say is that if we see an improvement, like if Oakland says, all right, listen, I want you to spend the next 120 days learning how to throw an off-speed pitch, maybe he could be relevant. They've said they want him to be in the rotation.
Yep.
So he's going to get some innings probably. This could be a really interesting pickup.
Yeah, this hurts all the Waldachuk, JP Sears, Caprillion types should be okay. But that Sears is a guy that takes a hit for this because he's on an MLB deal.
Yeah.
And he was very good when he was young. Very good when he was young. So the talent is there. It's a matter of, can he do what Ty just said, which is learn something in order
and they're
to
all going to lose out to AJ Puck, so it doesn't matter. So next on the list, the guy that's 32 going on 49, Nelson Cruz, signed with San Diego to add a little bit of more punch to that roster. I think this is a really interesting one, Robbie, with the lefty splits that they have. Like, this could be a Matt Carpenter or a Cronenworth split. This could be a bat off the bench. Like Nelson Cruz, I think, is past the days of being an everyday bat.
He lost it for sure last year. Yeah.
So I think this is just a really good depth add where you have some splits that you can take advantage of in that roster. Very similar in Toronto. Brandon Belt signed on the opposite side of that platoon with the lefty stick. I love this signing for Toronto. I mentioned this last year, Robbie, if you recall. This was one of the guys I thought the Jays should have went after before he eventually took the qualifying offer from the Giants. This one just makes too much sense. Like, he hit 20, 25 home runs in one of the hardest parks in baseball for a lefty to hit bombs. And so I love this. I think with the splits in the AL East, the ballparks he's going to get to hit in, I think this is a phenomenal home run upside. And I think he's going to get 500 at bats the way they're talking, which is interesting. Someone said to me yesterday, they still might trade a catcher. And although I think it's crazy, the Marlins still need a catcher. And so, the things we talked about in terms of delays, like that still could be it for Toronto. Like Jacob Stallings could be coming to Toronto. A guy like Kirk or Jansen could be going to Miami for the final SP5. It could happen. These are things that when you look at the way this roster is constructed at the moment, that makes a ton of sense. We'll see. It's a stretch, but either way, Brandon Belt makes the Jays better. And the big thing, patience, sees pitches, tough at bats, which just lengthens that lineup even more than it already is. So this is a great signing. On the other side of that, my guy, Julian Merriweather, gone. I'm happy about this because I still have Merriweather. I still believe there can be a guy there. He clearly wasn't having success with Toronto and Pete Walker. One of the very rare cases of Pete Walker not being able to do his magic. I think this is good for Merriweather. I'm really hoping he doesn't pass through waivers. I think his upside's too good to pass through waivers. Someone's going to have to grab him here because he has backside or back end upside. So I just think someone's going to grab him off the wire.
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if the Pete Walker magic has worn off with his sobriety because Kikuchi lost it last year. Merriweather has not been able to get it together. That rotation, talk to Barrios. Maybe he used to go out drinking with Barrios when he got there, and they weren't doing that last year. So there's definitely something up. I know I'm making jokes about the guy, but I think there could be something up with Pete Walker and potentially his time in Toronto, because it's not a good look when you're getting project after project and they're not working out great, on top of the fact that you don't have prospects that are coming up and filling out your bullpen effectively. You're having to trade for that. Yes, you've had guys like Anthony Kay fill time, but those are the same guys that then get DFA'd because they're not assets. Julian Merriweather falls into the same category. We got to see a healthy Nate Pearson. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying that, once upon a time, AJ Happ was like, Pete Walker is amazing.
Well, the one thing I'll say to that though, is that all the guys he's had success with are off-speed guys, right? And so all of the guys, the high velo guys that you're suggesting he's not had a great experience with, like Matt's, Happ, very similar guys, like Estrada, very similar, but Nate Pearson, Merriweather.
Kikuchi's not velo, right? He's still in the midst of that one, but
yeah, I think Kikuchi's more of a Kikuchi thing, not a Pete Walker one. But I do think there's something of a pattern developing in terms of the high velocity guys in that group that I think is worth noting because and if you've heard me say this, like how much I hate how many fastballs the Jays throw, right? And the lack of deception they create in their pitch calling. So there's something to be said there. And if you look at Merriweather's big thing, it's the homer. He's given up a ton of them.
Okay, well, that's fun and exciting, but not as good as Darwinzon Hernandez going from the Red Sox to Baltimore. This is somebody who was kind of like maybe he's going to be a guy with the Red Sox once upon a time, and it's just never come together. I don't know that that's going to happen with Baltimore. But because of that, Lewin Diaz, again, as we said, was DFA'd. We'll see on the next episode what's happened. And finally, Carlos Correa has signed, but it's back with Minnesota. It's going to screw up a few things that we're going to discuss tonight as we get to shortstops.
I thought you put screws up in there to make fun of his plate and his ankle. I thought you did that on purpose, but then you passed right by it. So
yeah, I didn't, but that also works well. Yeah. But yeah, Correa going back to the Twins is what we're going to talk about, because now it's time to transition into El Shortstop, which I think maybe we could agree, Ty. It went from when we first started recording this podcast, one of the weaker positions that was getting stronger, to now I would say the deepest position in fantasy baseball.
When we started, it's where catchers are today.
Yeah, it was weak.
Yeah.
Now, do you have the transition thing we talked about earlier? Do you remember we talked about you touching buttons for? Do you remember that?
For the transition, I
Yeah,
do.
the drop. Do you
And
recall it?
yeah, I
Because we've
definitely
missed our
wasn't
beautiful
prepared.
time to do it.
Well, you just didn't segue me properly. You just said like, "Are you
Oh, okay.
ready?"
Well,
And
let's re-segue. So,
so
Carlos
Now, before
Correa,
we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face. Of course. And that's it!
all right, it's time to talk shortstops, everybody. So we have ranked over the
flawless.
next, yeah, nailed it. We have ranked over the next 5 years who we think will be the most productive players at the MLB level. If they are a younger player and we don't think they're going to get full 5 years, but we understand they have a lot of trade value, they are going to be in the top 50. If it's an older player who we think can go out with a bang, but will not have 5 years, they are going to be in that top 50. And there are several players who are outside of that. What are the 8 categories that we look to when we make this ranking? The runs they create, the RBIs, the home runs, the stolen bases, the average. Those are your standard. We also count walks for the OBP guys. We count strikeouts against for the point league guys, and we count OPS for the psychopaths like us who play in 8x8. So we got it covered. Before we dip into the guys outside the top 50, I've got some of the guys from the recent draft class, as well as some guys who were rostered in less than 10% of Fantrax leagues before all the January drafting started, because some guys who were rostered in like less than 2% have now been drafted in 17% of Fantrax drafts. So things are happening here. So the time to strike for some of these guys is now. Anyway, first year player draft type guys like Brooks Lee, Mikey Romero, what were some of the Jackson Holiday is on the list. You'll see him. Cole Young is another guy who was drafted by Seattle. He's not on the list, but somebody definitely to note. Where's the one big guy I really liked here? We had Carter Young was one. Zach Neto is in the top 50. We'll get to talk about him. Kramer Robertson with Atlanta. Austin Gaucher with the Dodgers, and Addison Barger with Toronto, who did end up on the list. But these are all guys that can fall into that category of probably available in your dynasty league, and you're going to want to go and look for them. Now, we've got a lot of guys to cover in other episodes that are shortstops, but they're not in the top 50 for dynasty. Ty, is there anyone outside our top 50 that you feel is worthy of mention?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a handful here. One guy that's really interesting. It's actually his birthday today. Funny enough, Freitas Nova is a guy that was a number 1 prospect for the Astros, I think 2 years ago, and has really fallen out of favor. And really, the prospect shine is nearly gone, if not completely gone. Had a completely cut season last year. Only had 8 plate appearances, so he might be completely gone at this point. But my guess is that's more injury laden. We'll see what this year is. So just someone to note that's way down the board. I can't look this far down the board and not mention Yu Chang, just because he's Yu Chang. So he gets a brief shout out. Guy
What?
here that still
On this list? He must have been
no,
a shortstop like 4 years ago, and we just didn't delete it.
Yeah, 100%. But he also just hasn't. He was in Cleveland forever, so like playing shortstop in Cleveland, that's like waiting. I don't know. That's like waiting for a bagel in downtown New York. So you just don't do it. Adam Hall's on this list is a guy that Rob, is a local boy here. Is a guy that is in the Baltimore system, probably profiling as an outfielder long term.
Yeah, that's where he is on. I think that's where he was supposed to be on this one.
He's battled some injury issues. A 2nd round pick a couple years back. Real sharp kid. I coached him a little bit. Very, very sharp. I just believe in what he can be still. Very fast, very smart, contact bat, and a little bit of pop. So stolen base record, I think he had 16 caught once last year, in not a full season. So just some interest there, because the stats aren't going to carry him up a lot of lists. So just a guy, if you know. Other than that, a guy that I can still feel has some potential to give some value is way down as Didi Gregorius. I know he's fallen out of what is an expected starting position, which he had for a really long time. Still a left-handed bat, still could be some power. I'm actually shocked that we haven't heard him thrown around with the Yankees at all. Just he is so successful there, and Falafel can only do so much there. So it'll be interesting to see. Um, I'm surprised that rumor hadn't been thrown around. But those are the guys on my list. The guy that I still feel can be traded is Ronnie Mauricio. I feel like there's still a player here, and it just doesn't make any sense for the Mets to bury him any longer unless they believe he's going to play second base. And that's still entirely possible. I don't know if Escobar's got one more year. Do you know that off the top of your head, Robbie?
Escobar was 3 years, so he'll be in year 2 this year.
Okay. So that's an interesting one. And if they can move Escobar, then it really pumps the value of Mauricio. He's still young enough that you can probably hold him for at least half of the season before you probably got to think about looking at it. But could be a really nice trade asset to bolster that bullpen when it comes trade deadline season. But beyond that, there's a couple guys I know you're going to mention. The one guy that I like as a sleeper to break camp this year, because there's a soft spot in Chicago, the White Sox, is Yolbert Sanchez at second base. I think that's a real contact bat here, right? The power, I think there's more power than we've seen still, and there's always more power when you play in Chicago. So just a guy that I think could surprise some people, and it carries almost no real upside value right now. So you could buy a little low on that one. I think it's just worth noting.
Yeah, so the guys I've got here, Miguel Rojas, who we talked about in the being traded, he's interesting because, like you said, Ty, this could be a season where he plays a lot more than we thought he did. It's up to his wrist recovery, but you were talking about how the Dodgers' depth actually favors Rojas repeating those 500 at bats if his health will allow him. And again, we're like you can get a 50-50 guy there, and you put him on the Dodgers, and more runs get knocked around. Maybe he's a 60-60 guy. So. That's an interesting one. Absolute flyer and single season. Marcelo Mayer with Boston. He's outside because we're doing it based on production, and he's a long way away. And now that another draft year has passed, you either go high on the hype train with him, or you temper your expectations. And he's in temper mode, not Jackson Churio flying up the radar. Otto Lopez could.
13 bombs last year. That was the big thing that people were worried about. Like that.
Yeah.
That's moving up. Like high 13 bombs at shortstop is 2025 at the pros, right? So just something for a 20-year-old. I'm moving up on Mayer fast. I think most people should be at this point.
It's just his draft stock was so high last year. It's hard to put him inside our top 50 when the time frame for him to arrive is so far away, and there's a whole new crop of shortstops that are going to help to muddy the waters with where he is. So,
but Boston has no restrictions at that spot though. Like Trevor Story is the only thing, and with an elbow injury, the likelihood of him being the long-term shortstop went out the window, in my opinion.
Well, it's up to Mayer to produce and get promoted, and that's the one thing that Boston doesn't actually need to rush at this moment if they don't want to. They've locked up the only guy that they needed to, that they kept, I guess, with Bogarts going. They locked up Devers, so they got time for the rest of it to come around. Anyway, Otto Lopez with Toronto could come up, could get a shot. We could see what happens. He's a decent player, but there's absolutely no clear path to playing time for him, and we can't just put somebody up because we think they have some base set of skills that may or may not click. So he's outside the top 50 for us. Ryan Kreider with Detroit is an interesting one. Kreider did have some MLB time last year. What did he bat last year? 178, sorry, in the show. He had a 214 batting average in AAA and with some time in single A. Injured because he only had 290 some at bats or 288 at bats for the year. However, this is an OBP guy, 40 walks in 215 at bats at A and AAA, and he can be a power guy. In 2021, he had a 270 average, 349 OBP, and 22 dingers, as well as 15 stolen bases. So Detroit just added Nick Maton in the infield, so it doesn't become an automatic that he is deserving of time or anything like that. But someone to note, if you can pick him up because he's still prospect eligible, you could have him as like a final round draft pick, something like that, and maybe he helps you out. Noelle Marte is also outside our top 50. A lot of that has to do with the fact that, yes, the move to Cincinnati should help by ballpark factors, but it's not helping him make better contact. He's becoming very much the Adam Dunn, Eugenio Suarez boomer bust type guy. 3 true outcomes not there because he's not walking enough. So there's some concerns with Marte, and this could become maybe like a Jeter Downs type guy here. Sad to say.
Fun fact, and I mean, not a huge sample, but in the 126 at bats in the Cincinnati system, his average actually was up. He hit 293 in that sample. OPS was also up in that stretch. And Robbie, I know you're already kind of a Marte guy, but the OBP jumped as well to 397 in that stretch. So still, again, small sample.
But then he went to the fall league, Ty.
Yeah, some people fall in the fall league, and that's fine. He's still young, right? He's still 21.
Yeah. I'm just saying he's outside the top 50 because it's no longer like a clear path to MLB, say in 2024, opening day type guy. We gotta recoil back. I had him inside my top 50, but I had him at 49. So to me,
we're gonna see him in 24 though. It's not gonna be opening day, but we're gonna see him in 24.
I hope so. I want to see production come from him. I want to see him be what he's going to be, whether that's shortstop, third base, or kind of like a Vladdy, he ends up over on first, like whatever. I just want to see what he can become. But after seeing what happened with the fall league, which was not with elite pitchers, that was a very notable thing that with the fall league, and a lot of the results and scouts and things like that were like, yeah, they didn't bring good pitchers here. To not see a bunch of breakouts and guys like Marte, crack in major contact, that became a bit of an issue. So I did move him back. Previously, I had Marte at 19. So, and that was big, a big assumption on my part. He was going to jump in timeline, and now he's jumped organization. So also outside our top 50, Andrew Velasquez, who was up with the Angels last year and then got hurt. He's not an average hitter. He's a roto bench guy at best and a 15-teamer. So there's other Angels that we're going to talk about that are above him. But Velasquez came and surprised a lot of people last year and got a lot of playing time, but didn't have a lot of production. And Brooks Lee, who was a first-round pick of the Twins, who not only signed and started playing this year, but was promoted last year, but was promoted and was amazing. Absolutely, like looking like a lightning bolt up the rankings. We'd be excited to see Brooks Lee possibly as early as 2023. Well, then Correa comes back, and okay, now what are we going to do? Then you have Julian Eduardo, whatever his name is, the Canadian, the French Canadian that Ty knew for sure based on the last name was French, whatever. He also has a great AFL, so his stock rises up a little bit. So Brooks Lee, who looked to me prior to the Correa news like a 2024, impact potential bat with the Twins, who really was just going to have to be better and healthier than Royce Lewis, now finds himself in a pack very much like Ty and I were talking about this before, like Minnesota used to have with their outfield, where they had several high-end type prospects, Larnach, Kirilloff, Brent Rooker was one of those guys. There were guys. And what happened was they kept them all. They gave each of them opportunities, and none of them broke through as legit studs. Now, we know that it takes time to become an MLBer, but Brooks Lee's time might be suppressed instead of accelerated now, and that's why he's outside the top 50.
Definitely. So getting into the top,
I love him.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much anybody with Lee in it, you're there.
Whoa, Khalil, what is that?
Khalil Lee, Brooks Lee, those are your guys. But anyway, inside top 50, Jeter Downs sneaks in, and this is an interesting one. I like this as a real, I don't want to say team post hype because there was never really hype once he went to Boston. But
hello guys, oi, guys.
Like, he's kind of
what is that?
Like he's not really like an excitable post type guy. But 16 bombs last year, 14 the year before, out of the shortstop. What I think is really interesting, I think he's gonna be put into a position to make this team. And where I think people haven't connected the dots yet is I think CJ Abrams will be center fielder in Washington. And I think everybody still assumes he's going to play shortstop, right? So I think that's one thing where this becomes a really interesting 2023 option for somebody that doesn't have a shortstop, right? Or, if you have Paul DeYoung, right? And in your deeper leagues, not pointing any fingers at anybody, but you could be trying to replace those at bats that you were hoping for. And Jeter Downs could, I mean, no guarantee here. This is a shot in the dark. Steal some of those bats right out of camp because there's no suppression needed. He's past that in this scenario here, right? So I like him to get an opportunity right out of camp with the Nationals, and I don't think a lot of people have him tagged that way right now. So definitely a guy we're going to be watching in the spring to see what's happening there. Elvis Andres, I've got ranked further back. Robbie, you got him at 34. I don't know. Do you want to touch on why you think 34? I don't think the opportunity is going to be there for him to get significant at bats, and he's certainly in the later stages. So do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so like straight away, 2022 his ranking, I had him at 59th. 2021 he was 33rd. So this is the second highest I've ever ranked Elvis Andres. And the reason is that I don't I don't know what he's doing, but he's getting at bats. And last year he was the 9th best shortstop in fantasy 8x8. So I can't say he doesn't deserve a top 50 spot over the next 5 years because he just had a top 10 season and it was with Oakland. So I think he's just going to find a way to have a couple more years. And in that respect, I think he's going to be fantasy relevant.
Well,
So
the problem
he's
is that he's 34 and doesn't have a contract right now, right? So I just don't know. I don't know where he's going to find a spot. Like maybe the Dodgers, right? Like we talked about that. Maybe this is a good handcuff. That certainly maybe justifies your spot, but outside of that, like I don't know where a landing spot is for him.
Well, the only difference between the number 49 guy in Anders and number 48 in Brandon Crawford is that Crawford has 1 year left on his deal with the Giants, but you have him ranked very similar to where I have Anders ranked. We're basically flip-flopping these two guys. So I guess I would say I just have come to terms with the fact that Elvis Anders produces. Yeah. And as a guy who's had Brandon Crawford, he had one peak season and it was like such a high peak that I just feel the recoil back from that. The Giants they already tried to move on with Correa from Crawford. So I think the writing is absolutely on the wall for him. And I feel like this could be the final Brandon Crawford season. So I have him ranked outside my top 50. He just made it inside ours.
I actually think he's very similar to Belt in terms of getting to another ballpark is going to help him.
He's too old for that, I think, Ty.
I don't think so. Have you seen that hair? That hair is not going away. I mean, there's still like room there. So I don't know. I'm not buying that one. I still think there's enough here for some at bats. Like now, are the days of him being an everyday starter behind him? Yeah, I think so. Like I think that's pretty realistic at this point. And I think a depth role because he can play third base. Like he could probably play second base. I mean, his splits are still okay, right? Like last year he hit same side 240. Reverse splits were actually down against the righties. So like for me, that's kind of a potential theoretically a bounce back candidate. Like if we go back to like even 2019, right? Like be interested.
That was his peak year, right?
Yeah,
but even just, or was it 2020?
I can't remember. It definitely wasn't 19. He hit 228, so that wasn't
okay. So yeah, so it was 28 probably.
Yeah, but if we take a look at the righty lefty splits, if I can find them here, like they're more in line, right? So, I think the interesting part here for me is that he doesn't actually carry the split value. So it really just comes down to the defense, which means depth and power to the right side. Because power against the righties is for sure there. So he could be interesting spot for Boston. Boston would be an interesting spot for him as they wait for those. So I just think there's going to be an opportunity. I don't think he's out, and that's why I have him there. Taylor Walls is in Tampa. He's new Joey Wendell, right? Like let's call a spade a spade. He's just going to take those at bats around the infield because he's defensive first. He's not going to be a starter. You get 450 at bats, the way Tampa does Tampa, but not a ton of upside. So defense first bats are always going to get ranked backwards for me because there's not going to be a lot of peak seasons. Diego Castillo just ahead of him. I had him at 51. Robbie, you got him at 43. You're still hoping he's got some of that hype that he had before he went to Pittsburgh in the Clay Holmes trade. I'm not there with you. I think this is a guy that's now got kicked off of Pittsburgh. If you get kicked off of Pittsburgh, sorry, you suck.
He wasn't kicked off, all right? He was getting a raise, and Pittsburgh's like, look, we don't have the money for that. We're going to sign us some Rich Hill. So they let him go off to greener pastures, and now it's all, whatever, finagle. It's all screwy in Arizona. But I still think he's got 5 years of MLB time because of his age.
Yeah, but Pittsburgh has a long history with Castillos, so I'm shocked that they gave that up. So that's not a great sign. Nick Allen, kind of the same as Taylor Walls, maybe a touch better upside on the offensive
Younger.
side, maybe, but again, not an elite guy. We both have him 45. I think very similar. He's going to be a platoon infielder, and I don't see a lot of upside. The only thing I will say, he was in line for at bats last year, and Tony Kemp stole him. Right, it really is the way that played out, and I think Tony Kemp's gonna steal him again this year. So I think that really hurt Nick Allen's attempt to become a full-time major leaguer, and I don't know that he's ever going to recover from that.
We hope for more time for a guy like him and less from Kemp, but I mean, we see it every year that happens, and that's where I think the guys like Castillo can steal at bats. And as long as they are able to continue to, well, I shouldn't say continue, as long as they can have productive streaks and play good defense, they can stay in lineups. It's just a matter of, are they going to be fantasy relevant? Again, just to recap that this is the dynasty rankings for shortstops, and this is very much a stud laden position. So there's a lot of jostling much further back in our rankings simply because of preferences, and or we think they'll just stick around in Major League Baseball and therefore accrue some counting stats. It's not about Nick Allen being able to have a breakout season or Castillo being able to be consistent and get 400 at bats. It's the fact that they're good enough to hang on to a position that's important defensively to some teams and be utility guys. A perfect example of a late bloomer is the next guy up here at 44, Kyle Farmer, now with Minnesota. He's going to move around the diamond. He's going to provide some value. The Correa signing again hurts Farmer. If he becomes the third baseman, okay. If he goes to second base, okay. Correa is going to be at shortstop until a screw comes loose. So we know that you can bank on production from Farmer. He showed us that last year. It opened some eyes in your deeper fantasy leagues. He became an important part for teams in those leagues. In your shallower leagues, he may have been overlooked. Now's a good time to have a good look at what he's going to do. And I hate saying it, but spring training to see where Minnesota's putting him in the lineup is going to be an important factor too. They moved, was it Gio Urshela that they moved around last year? Was that the guy they had that's now out with the Angels?
Yes.
He was a similar.
Miranda's there too.
Yes, he was a similar case to what Farmer will be with Minnesota. Just see where they're going to put that player. Jose Barrio, this is kind of make or break for him. We both have him ranked 44th. There's absolutely opportunity for him to break camp with the Reds, whether it's as a starter or on the bench, more likely the bench. But he's never been able to put together a good stat line as an MLBer. Now is the time. Someone who broke out of flipping nowhere last year was Livan Soto with the Angels. He previously had played at high A and double A in 2021, 218 batting average, 293 OBP. Hold on, the stat line gets worse. 7 home runs, and the only good thing you would like in 400 at bats was 14 stolen bases. So he repeated double A, and what did he do? That's right, everybody. Murder balled it. 281 average, not anything great to write home about, but 379 OBP, good 80 points higher. He also was able to have 18 stolen bases, 6 home runs. So he's not a power guy, but a contact hitter. Then he got a promotion to the Angels, and I don't remember if this was like an emergency situation, but it doesn't matter because in 55 at bats, homeboy is a 400 hitter in the show with a 414 OBP. So whatever happened, whoever he was facing, he calmed down. He did not take poor at bats, and he, succeeded. So I really like him.
He had the highest batting average of all the Sotos in Major League Baseball last year.
Well, yeah, highest batting Soto in MLB 2022. What I like about him is his opportunity to now go play at AAA and then come back, in the next season and change. He'll play this year at just 23, and he's already got a taste of the show without the AAA time. So that's an interesting thing. rookie eligible if he's not owned in your leagues. Again, you late in a draft, you could take a shot on a guy like Soto, and it's a better, it's a pretty safe bet. He'll at least have MLB time. Next up, Jordan Lawler, 2021 first round pick. Did very well in the fall league, just had a great season, but we don't know Arizona's timeline for him. Otherwise, he would just be up inside the top 30, no problem. Jeremiah Jackson with the Angels. He's one of the guys that Soto will be battling with for a legitimate starting shortstop role with the Angels. And Jackson has had good and bad, a lot of promise with him, but not a lot of consistency. So we're going to have to see what comes of the 2021 season. We both have him ranked in the 40s, and he ended up at 40 for us overall.
Yeah. Inside the top 40, a guy that I think is not on enough radars right now, Addison Barger in Toronto. I've been saying it all offseason. Toronto has to trade Espinal or dump him, do anything to get him off the starting roster. And part of that reason is Barger's ready. There's another guy on this list that's also ready. And I could make an argument that he should be ahead of the other guy, but I think the power upside on the other guy we'll mention a little bit later is just too tantalizing for me to give him that bump. But like I was saying to Rob before we jumped on tonight, the numbers for Barger are off the chart. And if you look at what he did last year in the minors, it was pretty impressive. Across three levels, also made the fall league. Fall league wasn't great, but long season. He went from high A to triple A last year. 933 OPS, OBP of 378, batting average of 308. And he hit 26 bombs last season across those levels. So, definitely some upside here. The power definitely wasn't all the way there to the end, right? It faded a little bit down the stretch. Again, a long season for him. He had 465 at bats, 526 plate appearances. So that's quite a few for a younger guy here. It's a college bat here out of high school bat. I apologize, my bad. Just a high school bat here. The Jays have been very quietly developing, but he fits what Toronto needs, which is a solid, and I mean solid infield backup. So I don't know that we're going to see him out of camp for contractual purposes, but I do think of the Biggio Espinal mix, he's the better of those three players in terms of what he can do offensively, and he's probably the best utility guy defensively, even though Espinal probably has the slickest glove up the middle. He lacks a little bit at third in terms of the arm. So definitely an interesting guy here to watch, a guy that I think should be moving up a lot more boards. A guy that ironically has been going the other way the last couple seasons is Marco Luciano in San Francisco. I mean, if you don't think his stock's going the wrong way, ask Carlos Correa, because San Francisco doesn't sign Carlos Correa if they believe Marco Luciano was ready, and that's a really, really bad sign. So I'm not in on him. I've seen some really, really bad trades over the last couple of years, including friend of the show Glenn, who made a not so good one in our home league, Robbie, including Marco Luciano.
That was a big trade.
Yeah, it was not a great move. But then you have Ellie De La Cruz, who had a huge season last year. I like him moving forward, Robbie. I mean, you kind of made a comment about Cincinnati earlier. I don't think they're that far away offensively. I'm more worried about their pitching than I am about their offense. I think they've got 3 or 4 guys already there that can provide some value. And I think they have a nice crop of infielders that can spell off some of their depth issues. Now, are they going to win the World Series tomorrow? No, they're not. They're not going to do that. But I do think they're going to surprise some people. And I think Ellie De La Cruz, high power upside, is going to be one of those guys that it contributes to that one. So he's ranked here at 37 for us. We both had him. I had him 40, out of 39. I still think he's a year away, but just a guy to watch. Zach Neto, we mentioned earlier, first rounder for the Angels. Similar, Robbie, you've got him inside your top 30, which is aggressive. And you've said that you like him. You like him to move quick. You think the Angels are going to move him quick. I'm not there yet, but it would be Neto if they do. We'll stay there. Another guy that I think you have aggressively ranked is Jackson Holiday. I think Jackson Holiday can be a guy. But I think, again, high school bat, there's going to be a long time to develop here for 2 reasons. One, because he's still very young. This is his real first full pro season this year. We still got to see what that does to him, whether he gets exposed, what his adjustments are, all that fun stuff. But the other part of that is that the depth ahead of him is pretty solid in Baltimore. So he's going to have to excel to move, and he's probably not going to be moved aggressively because he's a first pick and because the roster's kind of, starting to fill out for that major league roster. So I'm not as excited because I think the timeline is going to be long, not because I don't think he can be good. I just think we got to wait a while.
Okay, I will circle back quickly here to Nito Neto. So he was immediately put in at high A and only 25 at bats. Basically, I think he was just getting his feet wet as a pro. And then he was promoted to double A, where he had 122 at bats in his draft year, where he was over 3 years younger than the average player. And the Angels double A team, the Rocket City Trash Pandas, best name in minor league baseball, just had him excel. 320 average, 4 home runs, 4 stolen bases, 382 OBP. I love it. I love the fact that he hit. I love the fact that he was promoted and the fact he was in the lineup every day. I think he is right in that conversation with Jeremiah Jackson for stealing playing time, for hopping up and above. Live and Soda will be up at AAA. If they repeat Neto there at AA, I would expect that to happen. And then I would expect to have Jeremiah Jackson and Soto at AAA, and that to kind of play itself out. Possibly Soto up as the bench shortstop if Velasquez has delays with his injury return. But I love that guy. And Jackson Holiday, just very quickly, I think we have a superstar on our hands with the Orioles here, and they're going to bring him up quickly because they have the rest of that base coming up and they want to have them together for that timeline. Now, that doesn't mean he's up this year. That might mean he's up in the next 2 years, so we could get 3 full seasons of Holiday. However, to Ty's point, he has to come out this year and be successful in pro ball, and I could easily see him getting a midseason promotion. And I don't know what they're doing with the AFL year to year, but wouldn't it be crazy to see Jackson Holiday in after last year we saw Jordan Lawler the year after his draft year? So
yeah,
it's a
just
thing.
Before we move,
yep.
Yeah, sorry. I don't disagree the potential's there. I think if you look at how Ilias built Houston and the layers of prospects that he built, he didn't really rush anybody while he was there. And I think you're going to see something similar in Baltimore. I think they just want to keep that constant tap turned on so that they don't remain the Baltimore of old, right? So I think that's why you wait, is you want to keep the trail running so you don't have a small window. You want to have an extended one. But just jumping back really quick to Ellie De La Cruz, he was 77th on Baseball America's list last year. I mean, he might be inside the top 5 this year. And I don't know if people really realize how big of a jump he took last year. And so I highlighted it, but I just want to make sure it's abundantly clear. And Robbie, if you were guessing, do you know his stats off the top of your head?
I don't know. I just know that he had gaudy numbers. So, people were all over.
He did. 28 bombs, which is pretty substantial. 47 stolen bases, caught 6 times. That's pretty impressive. 304 batting average, OPS of 945. So this is a shortstop prospect.
That was at sorry, Ty. That was at the Little League World Series.
I mean,
he was playing against men,
but then, yeah, he went to double. Yeah, he went to double A by the end of the year, and had good numbers, 305, 910 at double A. So, I mean, you might see an aggressive start here because there's room in Cincinnati to get him there this year, right? So he might start at AAA. I wouldn't be shocked. I don't know where they're double A team's Chattanooga. Maybe. I don't know where their AAA team is. I don't think it's a warm state, but if it is, he'll be there. And so AA for sure on De La Cruz though.
Trying to remember the AAA team right now, and I
don't know it either.
Well,
it's
anyway,
probably Columbus or something like that.
That would make sense.
No, that's Cleveland.
Yep. Oh, that's right. It is. Anyway, all right. I won't take guesses because I'll just be wrong anyway. Jorge Mateo, who I was also wrong several times, is apparently fantasy relevant. He's coming in at 34 for us. Baltimore likes him because he plays a good shortstop. He steals bases. His average sucks, but he's a counting stat guy, so he's far more into your roto than he will be your points leagues. Ty, did you figure out the team?
Louisville.
Oh, wow.
The Bats.
You go there. That makes sense.
Yep, I do.
because they have bat issues, and then they use sluggers. You get it?
Yeah.
No? All right. Anyway,
I see what you did.
Jorge Mateo, he's not great, but he's going to be playing for Baltimore. So, and then eventually Jackson Holiday is going to take his job. Bryce Terang with Milwaukee is a hyped prospect. He was first round pick in 2018, 21st overall, and has come on strong. He's repeated AAA this year, 2022, I should say, not this year. 532 at bats, 286 average, 360 OBP, double-digit home runs for the first time in his pro career last year, 34 stolen bases. So he is not a huge extra base guy, 24 doubles last year, 2 triples, but I'm thinking that Milwaukee likes to crowd the crap out of that infield, and he's already proven he can be a successful hitter at AA, so he moves up to AAA, does the same thing. What's the honest expectation here? I think he could start the year in the show. He's still going to be 4 years or roughly 4 years younger than everybody at AAA if he goes back, because he'll play this year at just 23. Milwaukee might be willing to have him come up, start the clock, all that fun stuff. It would be interesting to see. I just don't know how much playing time he would get. There's an error on the list, and I understand why it happened, Ty. I wrote PED Tim Beckham, I think 3 years ago. Whenever it was, he got popped, and he hasn't played since. Ty saw that. He's like, PED, that guy's still good. Put 33 on the old rankings as a mistake, and unfortunately it stuck. So we don't technically have a 32. Yeah, there you go. So I'll move on to 31, which is Royce Lewis with Minnesota. Again, like, have you heard?
Whoa. We can't just gloss over one Tim Beckham.
Oh, my God.
Here's the thing.
Where did he play last year, Ty?
He played in the California Penal League. No, but the truth is, Tim Beckham, his entire career has been said, you're going to be backup, you're not going to produce. I believe in history repeating itself here. And I think the situation in Minnesota's infield, you've got a bunch of guys that have injury history. They have at bats that are not locked in that lineup. And I think that could be Tim Beckham. Like, he could also play the outfield, right? Like, he can play left field and has played left field. So I think that's just an interesting scenario. That's all I'm getting at.
Okay, so in 100, just for clarification, in 133 at bats last year with A and AAA, he did hit 406. All right, so that's pretty damn impressive. Zach Neto, however, did that in the show. I'll have you all know.
He has nowhere to get at bats. Just saying.
Well,
no, you meant Levon Soto. You keep getting those two mixed up.
Oh my gosh, why do I keep getting them mixed up? I just need to roster both of them, and then it doesn't matter. And then I'll trade away. Oh my gosh, Jeremiah Jackson. I'll trade away Jeremiah Jackson. I'll get Soto and Neto, and then life will be good. And then I'll just acquire Brent Honeywell also. Anyway, so Tim Beckham, that was just a mistake that he just ended up here. It doesn't matter. Royce Lewis is also a mistake. And the reason he's a mistake is because he just keeps getting hurt, which is why he's with the Twins. Correa and Buxton are going to make a great little pairing of IR guys, whatever you're calling it. But Royce Lewis needs to come back this year. I think he'll be 22, 23 through the season. He needs to recover. He needs to get back into playing. And then Minnesota, I'm sure, is going to throw him right up in the show after a quick, 50, 70 at bats at AAA. And it's make or break at time, because he's been in the organization so long, he might end up qualifying for minor league free agency. And I'm not joking. It's a thing that happens when guys have been in the minor leagues for X number of years. Dermis Garcia was a guy with the Yankees who did it. There have been a few guys this offseason who signed that when we get into prospects specifically, I'll have notes on for those guys too. So at number 30 for us is Isaiah Kiner Falefa with the Yankees, play this year at 28. He was the 12th ranked shortstop last year. And no, I do not like him. No, I have never liked him. However, very much like Elvis Saunders, he gets the stats. He acquires points. He's just useful. He's not doing one thing incredibly well, but he's getting playing. I guess the thing he's doing is he's getting playing time. And because of that, He's in good lineups, and he's getting runs. He's getting some RBIs. He's chipping in and helping out. The bigger the league, the more interested you should be in him. I would say if you're in a 15 or under, don't worry about him. He's far more of a final pick bench bat type. If someone wants to take him early, let him. There's a ton of depth at shortstop, and you can find flyers elsewhere. But if you're looking to lock somebody up for a couple years, limited expectations, but a pretty high floor for a guy who's ranked 30th for us.
Yeah, definitely. Getting inside the top 30, Ezekiel Tovar is a guy that everybody's decided is going to be a fantasy star. I'm not there, Robbie. Peak 15 home run production in the minors, in a crowded infield in Colorado. A lot of Brendan Rodgers rumors. We've talked about that in previous episodes. In terms of trade, that would free up some at bats for Tovar, but I'm not from the school of thought that Tovar is locked into at bats this season. I don't know that he's ready. I don't think Colorado's in a position where they need him. I don't think they're in a position where his bat in the lineup is a must-have. So for that reason, I'm just not ready to move him into a top 20. I think some people expect him to be there. I'm not one of those people, Robbie. I think you're getting overhyped with the Colorado and the Coors Field thing. We've seen it before. It's not new, right? Brandon Rodgers is one of those guys that got very similar hype with very similar profile, and look how that's played out. So I'm just gonna, read the warning label before I buy. I think other people are just ripping it off and being like, what can go wrong? I'm just not there for that one. A guy that has significantly more upside, but I think everybody's overreading the warning label, and that's Alberto Mondesi in Kansas City. This is just
that was a good job walking all over that name.
So one of the guys here that would be way easier to pronounce if he would just stayed as Raul. But obviously that didn't happen. But I've got him inside top 30 at 29 or 27. Sorry, you've got him just outside at 31. I mean, the upside's here, right? And I think that's the reason I'm comfortable putting him in this range. I will say I did struggle to figure out where to put him. And just based on where I did the rest of the ranks, he kind of fell here for me. But I think he could still fit inside the top 15 really, really easy if he can stay healthy. And certainly, if he's playing well and making good contact, he's going to take at bats away from Nicky Lopez, right? The days of shortstop are gone, obviously. But I think, I think there's still something here. I mentioned this guy last year in the spring, had a huge spring in Toronto. Orvelis Martinez is a guy that pre-2022 Baseball America had him 75. Jonathan Mayo at MLB had him 38th, right? And I'm more from that school of thought. And the big reason for me here is there's still some strikeout concerns. Had 140 last year in 433 at-bats. Obviously concerning. But he slugged, right? 732 OPS. He hit 30 home runs last year. So, I mean, there's 45 home run upside here with strikeout numbers, true outcome scenario here. But there's room for improvement on the hit tool. The previous year at A-ball, he hit 279. His career minor league average is 236 with a 214 in parts of 21, and the majority of it being weighted to the 203 last year. So, there's room for hit tool improvement here still. Toronto is in no position to rush him, but there's only a handful of at-bats that have 40 or hitters that have 40 plus home runs in their bat. And this is one of them. So that's why I kind of have him probably higher than most, Robbie. I think it's important to see some of the at-bats he's taken in spring training against some good hitters and just turned around some really good pitches. So I'm excited to see what he can be. And some of these guys just need the huge upside arms to really excel. So we'll see. Luis Garcia is not one of those guys, a guy that you liked all the way through the minors and platooned out pretty much right where I thought he was going to play out. And these next two are just really going to hurt you, Robbie. So you're going to have to buckle up for
Wow. I just noticed who you got to talk about. I'm like, well, isn't this interesting? Let's hear what he has to say. Luis Garcia, who will play every day with the Nationals this year.
No, against right-handers.
Okay.
Every day against right-handers. I can get on board with. Every day against lefties, I cannot. And I think that split's going to get further. The one that'll be really interesting, and I don't know this off the top of my head, Robbie, is what Downs splits are against the lefties, because that could be a really interesting infield platoon for the Nationals. If for whatever reason Downs has the reverse splits there, that could be an interesting one. Ahead of this is Ha-Seong Kim, who had a reasonable season last year. He wasn't bad. He's still not the elite star that Robbie wanted him to be. And so he's not as per his hat cray as maybe I wanted it to be, but he certainly isn't worth what he got paid. And he certainly needed to start in the minor leagues like all the other teams wanted him to, and was the big reason he ended up signing in San Diego, because they're like, no, we'll put you right on the roster. And I think that's really hurt him, because I think he could have spent half or a full season learning how to hit the ball up. And instead, he's got absolutely dusted by Major League pitching for the last 2 years. And I think it's really hurt his development, because, he's hit the low ball. We knew he was going to hit the low ball, but, he cannot hit or defend, more importantly, the pitch up in the zone.
Okay. So I'll go back to Mondesi because it's just a super quick point. He's going to only he's only going to be 27 this season. So he is the prime post-hype guy, because he has already been to the top of the mountain and been, in the conversation of a top 15 redraft pick and, a top 50 dynasty guy. And then he's fallen off because of injury and poor performance. We telegraphed this. We said there's an issue here. He had a rise, and we saw the fall coming. It was too high of a K percentage, to sustain. The OBP wasn't going to be there, which meant he wasn't going to steal bases. Well, now he's going to be 27. He's got a few scars on him. Let's see if he becomes an overall baseball player, and we get, 8 years of career left where he can be a relatively good guy without being a top 10 contributor. Doesn't mean he couldn't have seasons where he does it, but consistently inside the top 10, I don't think so. But he could consistently be a very good player. Last year with injuries and everything, he also played mostly third base. He was 45th in 8x8. We'll see what happens this year. And then as for Luis Garcia, I think there is playing time. It'd be interesting if they did platoon him, but I don't think you can hide him from lefties, Ty, because then what's the point in having a 23-year-old platoon player? You want somebody who can be your everyday guy, whether it's shortstop, second base, you throw them around the field, whatever. You don't want to be hiding everybody on your roster, because then you get into matchups if your team ever gets good and you do get roasted, because somebody is going to be able to outmatch you with their bullpen from your lineup, and you're going to be into your bench too early in the game. As for Kim, we don't know exactly where the playing time is going to be, because last year he was a shortstop, and they've got Bogarts there now. And we will just have to see what exactly happens with Kim in spring training. But that's a really interesting group, because like you said, Martinez is one of the few guys who's a legitimate power bat from the shortstop position, and he should be praised as such and valued as such.
Well, and I think profiles as the Matt Chapman replacement in Toronto, right? So he fits better as a third baseman, and Toronto should have an open spot with Barger and Martinez coming out. I'd like to see them sign Chapman as a Jays fan, but I also understand if they don't at the same time.
Okay. Next crew here at number 24, we have Paul DeJong with St. Louis. Took a step back last year. We were expecting closer to a top 10 type performance from him. Play this year at age 28. Like to see a bounce back, but realistically, we don't expect to see top 10 finishes now. We've seen things that are not good, but we would like him to be better. JP Crawford at 23 with Seattle. He finished last year at 18. This is exactly where JP Crawford could be. He could have some good stretches. He's still going to be in the lineup every day because he's got great defensive ability. JP Crawford will have 5 full starting seasons as a shortstop, some with Seattle, possibly, free agent, go somewhere else afterwards. But this is regular playing time. We're not going to see 25 home runs. We're not going to see 20 stolen bases. We're going to see a good, solid guy, ideally, a roto type, plug and play in your 30-team league guy who just totes the line. You want to aim higher, but you'd be happy to have him on your roster. But you want the higher ceiling than JP Crawford can offer. At 22, we've got some ceiling in Anthony Volpe. He'll be 22 this year, I think he's going to play at, and it's expected that he's going to crack in with the Yankees at some point in time. Also, a guy who got a cup of coffee last year, Oswaldo Peraza with the Yankees. He'll play this year at 23. He had enough stats to be the 40th best shortstop last year. I think one of those two guys will be the shortstop, and the other will possibly be left field or second base, moving around middle infield. We'll see what goes on, but the Yankees hopefully give them each a shot over the next couple seasons to see what happens. And then at 20, we have CJ Abrams, whose Ty has already said he likes the idea of him shifting to the outfield. He's young enough and good enough that he can be a shortstop defensively. What we want to see from him is the bat that everybody got so excited for. And we flagged it immediately and said, there isn't power within this right now. Doesn't mean he couldn't figure out a way to just, hit more doubles. He doesn't have to be a home run guy, but the contact that was there was weak contact, not strong contact back in his minor league days. And then the surprise promotion last year was the prospect peak for Abrams, who is now, dialed it back. However, for my own personal rankings, I've got him at 20. That's the highest I've ever ranked him. Last year, he was 35th. The year before, 41st. That is when he was prospect crazy with everyone. But I didn't see how that was going to convert to MLB. So Abrams is somebody that I'm still cautious on. I do have him in one dynasty league that's important to me, and I'm holding him. I want to see what he becomes, but I don't think he's going to become a top 7-8 shortstop, especially with the crew that's above him. It's hard to climb this list from the mid-teens onward. So anyway, so 20. Yeah,
I think for me though, Abrams, and I said this earlier, is a center fielder. I think for all the reasons you just said, like, he's never going to be the elite offensive shortstop guy. The arm's okay. Even in a scenario where Tatis got hurt last year, they still played someone else at shortstop. So to me,
went with Kim.
That tells you everything. Yeah, well, I mean, but you could have gave your prospect guy, instead he threw him into a brand new position, right? So that tells you what you should need to know about his long-term realities at shortstop, right? So those are some of the things that I think a lot of people miss. Like there's hints on these things when it comes to position management, and that's one that to me is a giant red flag. Now he could still figure it out. That's always possible. But to me, it's an indication of what's ahead. This next group is an interesting one. We get into some real variability here. Nico Horner's a guy that you love, Robbie. Funny enough, you have him ranked at 18, just inside the 22 where I have him. I like him as a contact guy. I think very much like poor man's David Fletcher at this point, right? And I think that's maybe the profile for him for a little bit. I will say I think there's maybe a slight upside on the power versus Fletcher that might be there, but not a whole lot. I think that's a really good comparable. The at-bats are going to be there. Not a ton of crushing stats, just consistently mediocre.
And absolutely will be second base next year, not shortstop, but that's where he played in 2022. Now that we've got Dansby in town, he will be second base, which we've talked about that with the second base episode, has ramifications with other players with the Cubbies. But anyway, consistent at bats with Horner, and the high floor with Horner, I think, is what we like. Not necessarily the ceiling.
Well, and I like what you just said about the second base. Like, as a guy that's way down the shortstop ranks, probably relatively easy to acquire cost wise, but will jump way up the second base ranks. So when you think about that might be a good steal. Managing your dynasty roster this year. A guy that flew up boards last year because of the incredible power, and they are fun to watch. I watched him hit one against Toronto in the final couple weeks of the season, and just an absolute cruise missile. O'Neal Cruz here coming in at 18. I mean, it's one of those ones. I've seen a couple balls in real life in my lifetime that were just eye openers.
Baseballs.
Yes, correct. And so they left the yard rather quickly. I think I've mentioned the Trumbo one in the home run derby in Kansas City several times. But the one that Cruz hit last year was impressive. So the power's not the problem here. It really comes down to, can we see a step forward from O'Neal Cruz in terms of plate protection and contact? It is the only thing stopping him from being an absolute superstar, because he has an absolute cannon of an arm. He plays fairly good defense, And of everybody at the shortstop position in the major leagues, probably the highest power upside, right? Now, without the contact, it's never going to reach that potential. So that's why, like, if we can fix that, if we can see steps forward on that, there's a real star here. And so we'll see if that comes to fruition. Ahead of him, a guy that I think very similar to Horner is going to pick up a ton of value as the season goes on as a second baseman. It's Bryce Stott, a guy that had a reasonable outcome to his season last year. A little bit of ups, a little bit of down, but to be expected for a younger player. I still think there's a good player here. Probably that kind of Yadi Molina type at second base, like just a guy that's going to come in, give you some hits, give you a little bit of power. Maybe, and I mean maybe, turns into a Dansby Swanson type potentially down the road. But I think that's a stretch. We'll see. Head him, Javier Baez. I love this as a huge bounce back opportunity this year. We both had him ranked 15 and 16. You know, he falls in here for us at 16 overall. I like Baez as a huge bounce back candidate right now. Like, I think he's going to fall in redrafts, I think, in a lot of places. And I think if you're down a shortstop, I think he's going to be a guy that can get you some value, right? You've heard me talk about it before in terms of the penalty for changing leagues. That was last year. Before that was Lindor, right? I like Baez as a bounce back. I don't expect him all of a sudden to pick up a 300 batting average, but we might see 25, 30 home runs again. And I think that's what I'm looking for with Baez. Love him as a bounce back buy. As well as this guy, right? Like, I mean, Wander Franco, we talked about over the last couple of years, was way, way, way overhyped. Incredibly overhyped. Sorry. And very much like CJ Abrams, we flagged the power. The one difference here is I think there's better power than Abrams. Abrams' swing speaks to power a little bit better. But, you know, I think there is some power in this bat. I just don't think it's 30 home runs like people want it to be. I think it's closer to 20. And a switch hitter with just some grinded out potential. So this is one guy for me on my list, Robbie. You've got him at 13, a little bit ahead of me at 16. This is one guy I feel like I'm going to be wrong on this year. I feel like he's going to finish inside the top 10. I'm not ready to change the tune of what we've had over the last couple of years.
We haven't had reason to have to make the change yet. Now, last year I had him as 9th, the year before that 22nd, and this year 13th. I want to see it. Like, I want to see the season. We haven't had the full season yet. We need the Wander Franco show to officially come to Tampa Bay, so the 8,000 fans that show up can see it, and then all of us in the Dynasty community who wanted good things, and then there are those who were over the moon for him long before he ever, hit AAA, can be rewarded. If not this year, how much longer are we going to have to wait? And I don't mean that in the sense that he's 26, right? Guy's going to play this year, I think, at 22. So it's just what's reasonable to expect, because we've already seen on the other end the Nico Horners, the JP Crawfords, who are consistent point producers, but not top 10 guys. Is Wander Franco a top 10 guy that just hasn't got the at-bats to prove it? We'll find out. Baez, I love your take on it. Can't be worse would be another way to sum it up. Can't be worse than that first year in Detroit. It'll be better. And then, O'Neal Cruz is a project, but at 18th on the Dynasty rankings, the hype is off of him now. He's certainly somebody you can acquire. Now, it's not going to be a giveaway. It's going to be fair market value, but that's a good guy to pick up if you're trying to think of cornerstones for your keep forever dynasty, because that way you're not in a rush to move on if this next year or even the next year and a half it doesn't take off for him. He's just going to be a consistent and I think improving player over the coming years. So the next crew of dudes here from 14 to 10, get ready, baby. Number 14, the Twins, Carlos Correa. We know what to expect. I also, baked in a bit of injury time here. This is a top 10 shortstop. Last year, he was 10th. He should be even better than that if the Twins don't suck the donkey D that they did last year. As the year went on, with prospect after prospect coming up and, earning it as that lineup of prospects becomes more veteran laden. top to bottom. Correa should benefit from that, but we are going to have to be careful for that injury risk. There's a reason why 2 teams did not sign him to massive deals, and it's because they expected time to be missed, significant time to be missed. So we need to think about that as dynasty owners as well. Willy Adames with Milwaukee was 7th last year in 8x8. He's just been really, really consistent. He took a step up from being a guy in your 20s in your rankings to me now he's 10th. He's in a really good lineup. There's a lot of good players that are putting it together in Milwaukee right now, as well as prospects who are on the cusp who could come up and help to support that. He could have a big year. This could be the career year for Adames. And beyond that, consistent playing time will allow him to keep producing. Very much like a surprise guy for me last year was Ahmed Rosario, coming over from the trade from the Mets, released Rosario from a situation where he wasn't able to be a solid producer, and he was a top 10 shortstop last year. Quite like him long term. He's the type of guy who's going to kick around. I'm thinking maybe he's just always underappreciated, like a Jose Iglesias, but he was a top 10 guy last year. So if he repeats that, Cleveland's back in the playoffs, you're going to start to see people really locking in on him in Dynasty League. So this might be the final opportunity to buy him over the next 3 or 4 years or acquire him via trade. Top prospect for dingers right here. This is the guy, Gunnar Henderson with Baltimore, shot up the rankings last year. I had him at 50, full disclosure. Didn't know he had that season in him 2022. So he flew up the rankings for me, and my more modest ranking in 2021 of having him at 77th still seems fine. But that's because that was 2 years away from what he just did last year. I'm very excited to see what he does in 2023, a first full MLB season. Baltimore's okay, not good. So let's keep that in mind. The pitching is not going to hold them into games. There's going to be some weird long innings that he's out there. He's going to need to play some good D, make some good plays, and he's going to also have to force Jorge Mateo out of the lineup consistently, which sounds stupid, but it's going to have to happen because it seems like Baltimore likes him. So Gunnar Henderson's going to need to earn the at-bats. He might not even start the year with the big league club. I don't know, because I think last year came up, it didn't count against the service time and all that kind of, the manipulation that used to happen. I don't think that his time last year counts. So they might decide there is a way to manipulate it. Whether they do or not, it doesn't matter. We know we're going to see 400 MLB at-bats from him this year, and ideally, 500 and beyond, and quality at bats. And then the number 10 guy, the guy that gets us inside or starts the top 10, is Chicago Cub Dansby Swanson. That's right, everybody. The first player I ever picked in the home league, as we refer to it here on the podcast, Dansby Swanson. Still have the t-shirt, wear it most years right around draft day, but usually show up with the Ohtani one because I like it better. Anyway, he was the 3rd ranked shortstop last year in 8x8, got himself a 6-year deal, which locks us in on our 5-year rankings as a Cub for the entire time. He is just going to be Mr. Consistent. That's what he's become. We don't know that he's going to be a top 5 guy again, but I don't think he's going to be a post 15 guy. He's going to be right in that wheelhouse. And if the Cubs are better, Dansby could do exactly what he just did. Mind you, he was in a loaded Atlanta lineup. Chicago's not there. We don't know if, Matt Mervis and Eric Hosmer are going to be able to produce like he previously had Freddie Freeman, and then last year had Matt Olson. We'll see what goes on with the Cubbies, but Dansby at 10 starts us off on that. Ty, anything you want to say about that? The last 5 dudes?
Yeah, no, I mean, Adames is a guy that just consistently proves us wrong in terms of he's not good enough. A very sneaky guy. I mean, I'm terrified of Correa at this point. I won't touch him in any format just because of everything we've seen this offseason. I mean, kudos to him, though. He did sign the most amount of years and money in Major League history this offseason, so good on it. But Gunnar Henderson is just a guy. Like, I mean, I have him way up. Like, I see him at 6, and I mentioned this in the catcher episode when it comes to Adley. These 2 kids are just different, right? Their approach at the plate's better. They have solid at bats. They hit the ball to both fields. There's no one stopping him from taking over the job. So you mentioned Jorge Mateo. and I say Machado. And I don't think it matters. He's gonna go away in terms of
Well,
stealing
I
the
didn't
bats
think it
from
was gonna
Henderson.
matter last year, Ty, but he just kept playing. And that's where my
Yep.
concern comes from is we've seen and Mateo's not of the elk of other of other veterans who steal playing time from prospects, but for some reason he delayed the Henderson arrival. He also like interrupted it by playing. Now maybe he
Yep.
shifts over to second. I don't know. It's
Yep.
just I'm concerned. I've got
I
concerns for
just
the
think Henderson's
2023
a
season.
superstar. And I mean, I think the quietest one as a 21-year-old in Major League Baseball right now. Like, I don't think he's getting the hype that's deserving of what he's done to this point in his career. Like, he's a 21-year-old that is going to play. Like, he's nearly locked into a starting job. Unless he comes out in spring training and just has the worst spring training of all season. Like, I don't see how Baltimore doesn't move him. Now, there's some manipulation that can still happen. To your point, that's the one thing to be concerned with. But certainly not stopping me from trying to get my hands on Henderson. So inside top 10, Tim Anderson. He's just going to continue to be Tim Anderson. This is a very safe spot for him. I'm at 9. You're at 10. I mean, I think we all know what Anderson is at this point. A little bit of contact, a little bit of power, a little bit of speed, a lot of playing time. We like it, right?
A
Guy
lot of
ahead of him.
playing. Well, if he's
Guy,
healthy, a lot of playing time. That's all that separates him from the top 5 is playing time.
The
Health.
only thing I'm really missing from Tim Anderson is to be mic'd up every single game. Like, that would be
Oh,
electric, and I would watch a lot of White Sox games if we could
that
get
should
more
be
mic'd up Tim
doable,
Anderson.
right? Yeah,
100%.
that's
There's
doable.
no reason. I mean, if magicians can get up there and do like, oh, it's a dove, and they have that little microphone, why can't you play shortstop? I mean, I think that's a fair question. So him on the list is Jeremy Pena. Very similar to Henderson for me. I have him higher than you do, Robbie. You got him at 11. I have him at 7. A lot of people have Brantley in this spot. I don't think that's what it's going to be because you're gonna have a combination of the right-handed bats that you can't on your lineup, right? So you're gonna have Bregman, you're gonna have Pena, you're gonna have you're not gonna have Gurriel, but you're gonna have Altuve in that top 4. So I don't think you're gonna want to move Alvarez anywhere except for the 3-hole. So putting Brantley Alvarez back to back doesn't make a lot of sense. So because of that, like, yeah, Brantley profiles as a top of the lineup kind of guy, but because of Alvarez, I think you're going to see him bounce back, in my opinion.
So just for the Houston lineup situation, the potential likely lineup would be to, like, as you said, Altuve to lead off, either Brantley or Pena. That decision needs to be made. The advantage is Brantley as the lefty bat, because then you're going to come back with Bregman Alvarez as your 4, Abreu as your 5. You're not gonna screw with that Bregman Alvarez Abreu in my mind. That's your 3-4-5. And if Altuve is leading off, it really is a matter of, do you want to go triple righties or do you want to get a little technical with it? Because at the other end of it, you could put Tucker as either your 2 or your 6. So I think Pena does get dipped back in that lineup, and that's why I have him a little further back. I don't see him getting all of the RBIs because he's going to be in the second the final third of that lineup. And that's where it is for me, because behind him, and it was the same deal last year, they got 2 piles of nothing. Chris McCormick, who's not going to be getting it done for you offensively, and Martin Maldonado, who's essentially hurting your offense, but you want him to catch. And if they go with former top Houston prospect Corey Lee, I don't know that that's helping you either. So I just see issues with the back end of the lineup if that's where he is, but still producing, just not elite producing.
I just think Pena stepped into what he's going to be in the final 60 days of the season between September and the playoffs. I think we saw, like, he hit 278 in September with the bombs. He was the MVP of back-to-back series. Like, I just think he's that good. And I think it would be a mistake to bury him in that lineup, because then you're just going to tell him he's a defensive shortstop. And, I just think the other guys that you have that you're throwing in there are past prime, and that team's built for the playoffs. So you don't want to run your old guys in Abreu and Brantley out there for extra bats and time on the base pass throughout the year. you run your young shortstop out there. So I think that's going to be why he ends up there. For
I agree
good
with that
shot.
on
Now,
Brantley. Yeah, I agree
yeah,
with that on
and
Brantley.
the
But
reality
Tucker,
is,
I would put up. I would put Tucker up ahead
I,
of Pena, which still
he just doesn't
pushes
have the contact
Pena
though.
back to 6-7.
But Tucker
Okay.
doesn't have the contact. Pena does. And here's the other part. The reality is it probably is Brantley versus the righties, realistically. Right? Like it probably still will be that. But I think when you have neutral guys, the guys that don't have huge advantages against righties, I think you're going to see Pena still. So I think that's just something to note. We'll see. But I still like Pena. He's a professional hitter, very like Gunnar, and the power is there with the short left field porch. Love that. So ahead of him, Bogarts. I have him back further than you do, Robbie. Probably back. I'm probably going to be one of the lower guys on Bogarts. I am at 9. He's
Oh,
you're at
okay.
6.
Well, still top 10.
I mean, yeah, but I see it
We're
fading
splitting
from this point.
hairs. We're splitting hairs in the top 10 because legitimately this is, as we said already, this is an incredibly strong position. So guys that can have a top 5 season this year could be 15th next year, but it's gonna level out. So I don't think you're being too hard on him. Put him at 9.
No. But I just want to lay into the fact that like I have a bit of a gut feeling this is going to be one of the worst contracts of the offseason. I think this is going to be the one of that group that signed that were like, shit, we shouldn't have done that.
Like worse than Brett Phillips?
No, nothing's worse than that. It's like,
okay.
Like Bogarts is at least going to get some hits. So for me, Bogarts though, it's just he just seems like he's kind of like the David Price of infielders, like that late career fade because the power's never been elite, the contact's good, but not overly consistent. For he has good stretches, and then he has some fade here and there. So just for me has that bust potential down the stretch of his career. Lindor, 6 and 8. I think we're both still just we want to rank him higher. Probably, I think we're both probably in the same boat. You have him 8, I am 6. Speed, power was there last year. The average lagged still a little bit. I'd like to see the average take the jump here, and I think he could find himself in the top 5 real easy.
I do have Lindor at 4. It was Bogarts. It's at 6.
My bad. I had that backwards. I have him 8. You have him 4. Average of 6. I got columns mixed up. So yes, he was 2 last year in 8x8. I still have concerns about the average. I think he's going to take that next step this year to get back to that. But I'll be honest, like I still very much like Bogarts. I'm concerned about the long term here. I just think it's going to be steeper and later, whereas I think Bogarts is going to be more gradual fade from this point in. A guy going the other way, easily the best player probably in all of baseball in the last 2 months of the year, Bo Bichette. I have him too. And this is the reason I like Bo Bichette. And this, somebody, probably Ronnie is just murmuring somewhere, something not audible. Or just this. So the reality here, though, is that if you look at what Bo has done as a pro, with the exception of what was an awful start to last season, he's gotten better every single year. His defense has gotten better. His power is continuing to get better. His number of pitches seen in at bats is getting better, right? He's doing everything right to progress. And guess what? He still is one of the only guys, very much like Lindor, that can do it all, right? And there's only a couple 5-tool guys, even though these guys are all athletes. There's only a couple true 5-tool guys here. And Bo's still one of those guys for me. Like I said, I have him too. And guess what? If he moves to shortstop or second, he's going to be 1. He's going to be the number 1 second baseman. So, I mean, and that's not even really up for debate, I don't believe. So, I just think we saw what he can be in the last half of the year. And I think we're going to continue to see that. And he certainly, for me, is pretty easy to give a 5-year window over pretty much everybody ahead of him in my eyes.
That is not exactly how I feel, but I do still have him ranked 7th. So he's good. He's just not Mr. Consistent to me. But I do agree. Ronnie is upset. He messaged me the other day and said, "Can I please come on for the shortstop episode?" I had to remind him he's not a regular, lineup guy on. He's special guest. And there's really nothing special about it. So anyway, just for Ronnie. Yeah, there we go. Just for Ronnie. Bo did not make it inside the top 4, but he's 5th. And as we know, with a lot of these guys that are younger, they've got to prove themselves year over year with consistency to get to the point where we can rank them really high. And that's exactly when in dynasty rankings, people are like, well, they're going to get old. So we'll see what happens with him. But anyway, somebody who I've consistently been in like 7 or higher in my rankings. And Ty, you've been in the same situation. You've been highly ranking him when the odds and the health was going against him. But we got a good year out of him last year. And we're hoping for bright things in the future. As number 4 ranked Corey Seager with Texas. It was just a good year. He was 4th last year. We've got him ranked 4th. You had him 5th for the next 5 years. I've got him 3rd for the next 5 years. We think that Texas team is just going to be consistently scoring runs, and he's going to be a big part of it. And that's all there is to it. So, Ty, why don't you?
I'm very happy with my consistency on Corey Seager. I have him 5th the last 3 seasons. He comes in at 4 for this year. Number 3 on our list, number 1 for me is still Tatis. Nobody, like in terms of fantasy value, no one touches him. Like nobody in this list is even close to what his ceiling is. Right? It's the Oakland Athletics Moneyball. Like there's Tatis, then there's a pile of garbage, and then there's the rest of his list.
Goodness.
It just, but nobody can do what he does. No one.
Yeah, that's right, because everybody else plays by the rules and he cheats.
Okay, add it to the skill set. It's just one checkbox.
It's not a skill set. He got caught. Anyway,
getting caught can be a skill.
Okay, this cannot get better if we continue down there. Anyway, Tatis, we know the ceiling is massive for Tatis if it all comes together. But we also know how rare it is for a player to put it all together year after year after year. So far in our rankings for positions, we've only had one who's done it year after year after year, and that's Freddie Freeman. And it took several years for him to even get the credit he deserved years before, that he just keeps doing it year after year after year. So for Tatis, I don't know that that's going to come together. Combine the 2 surgeries he had after the suspension was announced with the fact that he's not going to start this year playing, and he's only now here in January starting to do any kind of rehabilitation. I've got concerns for him to have a really crappy 2023. So he's back for me. I mean, he's 5th. He's, it's not like I ranked him 25th or something like that. I don't give up on the guy. I just don't know that he's going to dominate the next 5 years start to finish, because he's not starting the year in a lineup because he's suspended for cheating. So he's 5th for me. Ty, you do have him, up there.
It was hair product, man. Everybody knows it was hair product.
Yeah, he wishes it was hair. I wish I could get suspended for hair product, but I guess you got to have it to apply it. Anyway, number 1 for me, but number 2 for Dingers is Trey Turner, formerly with the Dodgers and now with the Phillies. He went from one loaded lineup to another. We could argue the top of that lineup is going to be better. The back of that lineup could be better, and that would mean more runs for him, more opportunities to drive guys in because they'll be on base. And I love everything about Trey Turner in 5x5 and 8x8 in points. Ty, I don't know what's going on. You have a mute button if you're choking on your lack of success with Trey Turner or your lack of success with Fernando Tatis Jr. Because you don't roster Turner, and Tatis didn't do a damn thing last year. Anyway, Trey Turner I like as my number 1. Ty's got Tatis as his number 1, but we don't do what he or I like. We do a good old-fashioned average. So, Ty, who was the number 1 based on average?
Well, really quick, just on Turner, like I have him back a little bit further at 4. It's not that I don't like Turner, but like career high last year in terms of RBIs, also near career high number in runs. I mean, listen, this is a guy that's built his career on his legs, and over the last couple of years has tricked people into believing he's the full tool set. Oh
my goodness.
I'm not so sure the power is there consistently enough. And I'm concerned about the legs. Like the OPS last year was 809. Like that's way down compared to the last couple of years. Right. So although the home runs were there, some of the other totals started to fade a little bit. So could be an anomaly. It's possible. I'm just going to play the safety net here because he also spent the first half of his career playing the injury, pin the tail on the donkey. So we'll see what that means. But number one is a guy that I think everybody loved last season to just get crazy about, Bobby Witt Jr. And he had a very reasonable rookie season. He was the 5th ranked shortstop by 8x8 standards. There's nothing not to like about Bobby Witt Jr. He's a great player. He's going to be a great player for a long time. He has all the tools to stay at shortstop. He has all the tools to continue to be a fantasy guy. The only thing I'll throw here, just in terms of discussion point, Robbie, I just don't think he's the number one guy. I have him 3rd. You have him 2. He's always going to be up there. Like, I think he has that skill set to be up there all the time. I think he's going to be that guy, very similar to like a Corey Seager. That's just always good, always near the top of the heap, just never the top of the heap. And it doesn't help when he has to go against guys that have better hair product.
Well, it might be true that he never has a number one season, but on aggregate, I think, we didn't do him a disservice by having him as the number one, and this might be the only time that happens. So, a reward for Bobby Witt from coming from a guy who we had ranked in the teens, who was able to put it on, and this is not on a competitive Kansas City team. So we see brighter days ahead for Kansas City. However, a lot's got to come together for that to happen within their own organization, and they're not reaching out for those free agents. So a lot of the prospects that they have need to take steps forward, very much like Bobby did. So credit to him for getting to one, but I do agree with you. I don't think, neither of us think he's the best shortstop, but I think he's just earned his way with the 8x8 rankings to be right there, and 100% an asset to have. And I very quickly, Ty, here, I know we're approaching a 2-hour mark, but if there was someone not inside, let's just go outside the top 10. Let's say go outside the top 11. Don't count Gunnar Henderson. Is there a guy on this list that you think could be inside the top 10 next year that's outside the top 11 right now?
So in 2023?
Yeah. So when we go to do this in 2023, somebody who is currently outside the top 11, who you think could be in the top 10?
I think it could be Ellie De La Cruz.
Okay. So a big jump for Cruz, coming from 37. You think he could become, because he could cement himself with a second legit season.
Yep.
Okay. I will say this. I don't think there is a guy who's going to be inside our top 11 this year that's not already, or inside our top 10, sorry, that's not already there. I think the consistency of this position and the age, the oldest player inside our top 16 is Baez, Javi Baez, and Tim Anderson's right there with him, 29 with Bogarts as well. It's a young man's game right now. Trey Turner's ageless. You fool. You didn't even know that. So I don't think, no matter what Peraza does, Volpe does, Henderson's already 11, so he's there. But Tovar is going to have a beyond belief season, especially on the road. That's a big thing with those Colorado guys. We saw that with Story. Story stole all his bases on the road, hit all of his dingers at home. So with Martinez and whatever, it's a stacked position. It's an area that you absolutely need to have a couple of options in. And if you're going to do what I did in one league, which was punt on the MLB side and try to draft a couple of guys, you need to be looking at the guys that are closer to the show than the ones that are further away. I would completely ignore the J2 class for this coming year if you want to get better, because shortstop is top heavy right now.
Agreed. Yeah. And I mean, let us know what you think. Tell us why you think our top 20's off. If you disagree, there's lots of room for bouncing around, but hit us up at Twitter at DingersPod. Until next time, it's been Tyler and Rob here on